Hey guys, welcome to the Backlog Podcast number 51, and today we got a chance to sit down with Juicebox FGC and talk about how we got to start with fighting games, why Virtua Fighter is one of the hardest fighting games to play, and being a fighting game teacher. I hope you enjoy this episode.
That's a podcast problem every time.
There we go.
There's always something.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna totally kick open my door, and then I'm gonna walk through. It's gonna fire things up. By the way, did you see that there's that streamer kid that has like Pyrotechnics in his bedroom?
No, I've heard about them. Yeah,
it looks problematic.
How does that go about? Like, what? Like, is he not worried? He's not worried about burning his house down, or
smoke inhalation, burning house down. It's fine.
Are we just too poor to understand that? Is that really what that is?
Totally safe. You've held a sparkler, right? You've held one in your hand. Did you catch on fire? Seems fine to me.
Exactly.
It's true. It did burn my fingers when I held it too long, though, because I was a dumb child.
Yeah.
It's getting kind of warm.
I always thought it was like super crazy that he went ahead and did that. He must own his parents must own that house.
You've never seen him in a fire in the same realm. Like, how do you know he's not fireproof? No, you don't until you test it.
That's true. He could just be constantly saturated with jelly of some kind. That flame-resistant jelly.
How do you know? How do you know he's not actually a squirtle?
CGI.
Exactly.
It's all CGI.
He could be the first mutant. But no, I mean that's insane. But it's also really cool. I think a laser light show would probably be more practical. But if you got the money, spend it, right?
You could laser light show through the smoke from the pyrotechnics. What up?
See, that's not true because you say he could be the first mutant, but I know canonically, what is it, Darwin? All it takes is for you to put an explosive in his mouth, and he dies.
Oh God, can we not talk about the worst part of X-Men First Class? Because that was almost a perfect movie, and then you just have to ignore the central conceit of Darwin's powers in that he adapts to everything.
Except for explosives. Did I don't know, man. I'm just saying, like, explosives weren't. Well, maybe they were here before we were. So
I'm just saying he was in the comics and he was completely invincible. Literally, like, absorbed an explosion that would destroy the universe. But it's cool. It's whatever,
Really?
Just comic shit.
Power scaling's a bitch. It is what it is.
Movie scaling. Movie scaling's a bitch.
Movie scale. I think they just realized that they were like, oh fuck, we put him in this movie. Like, what are we gonna do? And then they had to back down real hard from what was going on. So there
could never be a crisis. He just wins.
You have to fridge at least one character to motivate the other characters to win, right? That's just basic movie writing.
But him though?
It's true. They neuter characters all the time and everything. I finally saw the first Shazam. They nerfed the crap out of Shazam. Guy's weak as hell in that movie.
Oh boy. Speaking of which, I tried to watch Shazam 2.
Oh no, tried to?
I tried to. I made it. It was one of those movies, and this is just me. This is just my opinion, where I made it halfway through it, and I'm like, oh shit, there's another hour left. It felt
terrible
like
feeling.
An eternity, man.
That's rough.
What was it? Did you feel like you were sitting upon the rock of eternity?
Oh my God,
that's
I don't even understand. That's too deep.
I'm sorry, I'm nerd power leveling. No, it's hey, at least you tried, because based on the box office score, most people didn't even bother to try watching Shazam. They're like, is this going to be in the old universe or the new universe? And they're like, we don't know. Okay, cool. So I'm just going to not watch it then.
It's in the old universe, by the way.
Yeah, so.
I would say
I've heard people had that complaint about, did you guys ever see Speed Racer?
Yeah.
The movie or the
Wachowski Speed Racer? The live action.
I loved that. Yeah.
Okay,
that movie's great.
I need to see it.
Everyone needs to see it. And at some point,
whoa, guys, one person at a time, please. Hold on, Juice, go ahead.
Sorry. If at some point you're going through the movie and it's like, wow, this is a really, really long and weird and cartoony and over the top movie, it's like, yes, because it's based on an anime and they did a really good job.
Yeah.
The Wachowskis understand anime. That is what I learned from that movie.
True. honestly, Speed Racer was one of those movies that I saw on just network cable one day, and I was like, what is this? And then I sat down and watched the whole thing, and I'm like, God damn, that was a great movie. And I was like, how did I never hear about this? And then I saw that, oh yeah, it was a box office failure. And I'm like, this is probably one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I think it still is, actually. But the problem is it's been so long since I've seen it that I don't know if past me thinks it's the best, like current me will still think it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. But yeah, absolutely, 100%. If you've never seen Speed Racer, go watch that movie. It's a technical masterpiece as well.
All right, I'll go watch it right now. You guys,
all right, man. See ya.
I know, right? Hey, you gotta see it. It's worth it. No, I feel like that. I wonder if the divide on that movie is like, have you seen the source material? Because if you've seen the source material, you're like, this is perfect. This is the best thing ever. If you've never seen Speed Racer before and don't know anything about it, you're like, this is kind of weird. I don't know.
It's partially the source material, but it's also like people's capacity for like cartooniness and colorfulness. Like some people see, like if you see people say, for example, that the upcoming Street Fighter 6 doesn't look good, it's because they are not used to like bright flashing neon colors being the main color palette of a thing. Or because, you know, like you can say, I don't like Luke's hair, but then you see the level 3 animation and everything like desaturates a little bit. And then there's an absolutely different, you know, color palette being flown at you. And some people don't like those big visual changes. And they very clearly wanted those massive visual changes like in the Speed Racer movie. So it looks jarring. And some people really hate that. Is what it is, but you know, in my opinion, it's beautiful.
So what you're saying
keep your
is
child wisdom. I mean, wisdom, like whimsy, childlike.
I was gonna say, like,
whimsical?
yeah. So what you're saying is Zack Snyder corrupted everyone's view of what a movie should be,
and Michael Bay,
and Chris Nolan, because you know it doesn't need to be grimdark to be fun, right? I think Marvel proved that, but people, you know, adults periodically forget that. They're like, no. Gotta be dark and serious. I remember even though it's a movie about people
Batman versus Superman.
Yeah.
In like the gaming sphere, it was like Gears of War 1 was like when the discussion started, and it was the same discussion every time a new shooter would come out. We have enough brown and green. We have enough brown. We have enough brown and gray.
The gray.
And it was like Gears of War sort of kicked that off. I remember.
I don't get it.
Call of Duty kept it going too.
The dark and gritty reboot.
I feel like that was also a problem with like tail end PS2 games. Is like they all started to just become very gray and dark, and but PS3 was horrible about it, or yeah, PS3 is it 6th gen I think was really bad about that, and then sort of it even ruined the games you love. Like the reason why we got DMC is essentially the same reason that you know Gears of War and all those things, because they thought people didn't want those games anymore. They just wanted like an Americanized, you know, Western, which is how we got the weird, is it the weird Bomberman game too that existed where there's like an Xbox.
Dark and gritty Bomberman game?
Yes, there is. Yeah. It's on the Xbox.
I know what you're talking about. I remember the box art. It's a bomber. Yeah, it's like Bomberman Zero, I think it was called.
Yes. Yep.
Something like that. It's heinous. It's awful. It's not Bomberman.
Like Gears of War.
Where's my adorable little Bomberman?
Huge reason for missteps in gaming throughout that generation.
Thanks, Cliffy.
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, yeah.
Cliffy's trying to come back too. He's still trying to get lawbreakers off the ground.
Dude, and there was also, I was just listening to someone talk about this the other day, and it was like a guy came, like this guy from a Japanese company. I don't know if it was Square Enix or what. Went to this press conference, and I don't know if it was Cliffy B. I don't think it was Cliffy B. Who's the dude, the really annoying dude from Microsoft, who's kind of a scumbag? I'm probably describing a lot of people.
If you want to play our new Xbox online, we have a console for you. It's the old Xbox. That guy.
Oh, that guy. Yeah.
Is essentially he shamed this person for, you know, saying Japanese games suck or whatever. So it was this huge theme of that era, just to say, you know, Japanese games are terrible, colored games are terrible. I don't know. It's a really dark side.
Look at all that color. Nobody needs that. We only need like 3.
Suck that out.
Yeah, they didn't like the label of JRPG, even though I would argue that the JRPG is probably the most consistent contributor to the development of overall RPG game design than any of the Western RPGs. Because I think the Western RPGs decided to mine way too deep into D&D mechanics and got just ridiculously hard to play and complicated to explain to new players. And JRPGs were like, no, let's make it fun, and the mechanics just build on themselves. It doesn't just start super complicated. And it's just like, but yeah, no, they hated being called JRPGs for a while, even though I think a lot of people who grew up now would argue they were the funnest RPGs to come out in that era.
Yeah, but being a JRPG kind of like segregates them from being just an RPG. That's what they just wanted to be, is just an RPG. They didn't want to be a JRPG.
RPG, yeah.
Yeah.
I think even now I've started to hear people use different terms other than JRPG as well, and I can't remember I've only heard them like this come about recently, kind of like in games in general. So I don't remember the term. So I apologize. But yeah, I really think
I would probably just call it a classic role-playing game. Classic role-playing.
Yeah.
You know, and then if you wanted to differentiate the Western RPG, I guess you could call that more tabletop style or something. I don't know. Like, I'm sure people will come up with a good way to call it.
There's classic RPGs, which are CRPGs, and then there's action RPGs, which are more of like the more recent things that we've gotten. Like with the more recent Final Fantasies are more action RPG
the Tales games,
than traditional RPG.
15, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
16 is going to be an ARPG. Yeah.
Yep, it is.
But,
Looks fire, by the way.
Does look
Damn,
so
that
good.
game
I'm
looks
so
good.
excited for 16.
Going back to some like medieval, like actual Final Fantasy setting stuff. Oh, they got me hype.
I love the trailer. Love it, every second of it.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I love
And kaiju fights. Let's go.
They have kaiju fights.
Yeah.
August, what were you gonna say, man?
I guess I like, as someone who, like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good JRPG that has turn-based mechanics that are kind of interesting and get you to think. But as someone who's extremely ADD and just wants to press buttons, I've always craved, the ability to do something that's a timing-based thing. So I love that, like, modern JRPGs have just taken that evolutionary step now, and the ARPGs are just turning into single-player fighting games. Because it's just cracked to me. Like DMC 5, I'm like, yes, this is, why couldn't we have had this years ago? This is the perfect evolution.
We did. It was called DMC 4.
I mean, but like, DMC 5 was the next step. That's what I'm saying. Like, they're finally getting it. They finally get to a lot of the, like, I'm not gonna say the average person, but most people just want to press buttons. And like, I like that we finally get to do that. And like, in Final Fantasy 7 remaster, like, we got both options. You can play it turn-based, but I know most people just want to press buttons.
Absolutely. That's why people love fighting games. So let's actually delve a little bit into the interview questions we have here.
For sure.
So we don't hold Juice for hostage for too long with our objections on RPGs. Juice, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and how you got into the FGC, my man?
All right. All right. So Juicebox is the nickname. My real name's Eric. I can tell you the story about how I got that name as well. But my start in fighting games as a kid, I got an NES when I was really young. So my first game was like Mario Brothers. I got into gaming as a kid in general. But the Super Nintendo was the system that I probably played the most as a kid that had the biggest like impact on my development. And my favorite Super Nintendo games were like Mega Man X 1, Mario RPG, and Street Fighter 2, like World Warrior, the first Super Nintendo one. I played World Warrior over and over and over as a kid, but I didn't really get it. Like, I wasn't like thinking about attack speeds or anything like that. I was like, oh, Guile, he's American and he works in the Air Force. How cool. And it's like, who's this Ryu guy? Why does Ken look like him? What's a sumo wrestler? And I was just like enamored with it. I beat the computer over and over and over and loved all the music and all that good stuff. But I didn't really get into fighting games proper until high school. So 2005, I'm living in Long Island, New York at the time, and some of my friends were playing like Smash Brothers Melee. So that's sort of where it starts for me. It's like, ooh, Melee, what's this, what's that? We start watching videos, we learn how to wave dash, we learn all that silly, tech stuff on a GameCube controller. Around the same time, we saw the Daigo Parry video.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, what is this? And I'm like, well, that's Ken and that's Chun-Li. Ask me how I know. But it's like, what game are they playing? That's not Street Fighter 2. So we learned that that's Third Strike. And at the time, the way to play Third Strike was via Street Fighter Anniversary Collection on PS2. I think it was also on Xbox or something. Mm-hmm. So we were playing Anniversary Collection on PS2, on pads. Some of us, eventually I think would get sticks. And around that time is when I graduated high school and went to college, and this would be in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's around 2006. So I started getting into fighting games proper with Melee, and then that sort of turned into Third Strike. When I went down to college, there was an arcade nearby and they're playing Third Strike and they're pretty good. So I tried to play with them, and I was getting destroyed, but I was having fun and starting to get the building blocks of how to play fighting games. They were playing CBS2 at the time. I saw my first roll cancel. I'm like, this is broken. This isn't fair. That was, scrub juice, and, after that, around that time, a year and a half, 2 years after that is like, hey, we're making a Street Fighter 4. And I'm like, all right, that's going to be my game. I want to try really hard to be really good at Street Fighter 4. So summer 2008, if I recall, was the release of Street Fighter 4 in Japanese arcades. And at that point, because I was a fan of Smash and I had gotten into Third Strike, I was going to EVO. My family lived in Vegas, and at that time, EVO was free to attend. You could just go and watch, and it only cost money to enter a tournament. So I had been attending EVO every few years, and then I heard, okay, at EVO this year, they're going to have Street Fighter 4 cabinets so we can try it. So I believe they had 3 pairs of Ulix cabinets that were set up on free play with a 7-win limit. And so, yeah, I had been watching a lot of videos, and I was just doing super, super basic stuff with Abel. I said, I want to learn one of the new characters. So the new characters were Viper, Rufus, Fuerte, and Abel. And I'm like, Rufus is ugly. I don't really like Fuerte. Viper, I had not yet hit my redhead mommy phase. So Viper was not ready for, I was not ready for Viper at that time.
Unlucky.
So, yeah. So I'm like, okay, Abel, he looks interesting. Amnesia, I can work with that. Grappler, never played one. Let's do it. Turns out he's very interesting, and it turns out later that he's, partially inspired by KOF gameplay, and that's a cool just connection there. But I was just doing super basic stuff like block a Blanca ball, do an ultra. And with super basic things, I was able to win a few times. And so how I got my name, exact same time frame, is most people that were playing at the cabinets had entered other tournaments. So they had their EVO badge, their little lanyard, and there were rows and rows of lanyards on these arcade machines. But I didn't have one because I didn't enter any tournaments. What I had was some trash that morning because I went to breakfast at Jack in the Box. So I had a little empty box of Minute Maid orange juice that I put on the cabinet because I didn't have a lanyard. And I remember it was my turn and someone said, hey, who's the juice box? So I just you know what, I'll work with that. That's how I got the name back then. And I just decided to keep that for a bit. But yeah, after that, the rest is sort of history. Since then, I've been playing very competitively, traveling when I can. Street Fighter 4, I got 9th place one year. The other years were 13th, 17th, 13th. And after that, I started to branch out. I got into the KOF games. I played Tekken on and off, and I like and appreciate and understand that game. But now I recognize that there's parts of it that I don't like as much. I've since then branched off into Virtua Fighter, and I try to play as many different fighting games as I can and sort of build up my skill set from there.
That's awesome, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
can I?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So just kind of self-inserted random questions, but you've been Juicebox FGC for a hot minute now. You have a storied history, and anyone's kind of been around and knows you're out there grinding, training, teaching, doing all that stuff. Has the name Juicebox kind of taken on new meaning the longer you've been in the game? Have people made interesting comments to you and you're like, oh yeah, it also can mean that too? Has it kind of evolved in its meaning to you?
I wouldn't say so. I don't really think of it as a big deal. I'm just a dude who likes video games, happens to like fighting games, happens to like teaching fighting games in specific. I don't think I've said this, but I'm 34. I turned 35 in August this year. So I don't feel old. Actually, I feel quite chipper. Thanks for asking. But it's like, you know, I can walk in a room and someone will go, "Hey, that's Juicebox," and like I can appreciate that, but I don't. I'm a very humble, pretty low key dude. I mean, if I'm okay, let me be honest though. I almost went to drama school. Okay, I am a theater kid at heart. I appreciate being on a podcast. I can even appreciate being on camera. I like public speaking, but despite that, I'm actually a fairly humble person. So even though I light up a bit on stage, even though I'm a very animated person, I am not really in my daily life. So if I don't really want or even really like or appreciate notoriety much. I try to be as low key as possible. So it's nice when you can go to another state and someone has heard of you. But beyond that, I honestly rather not. You know, call me by my real name, Eric, or you know, you could just say, "Hey, Juice, how's it going?" And I would prefer if you said then, "Hey, let's go out to eat," or "Let's play," or "Let's talk about this game," and you know, trying not to make it about me or anything like that. There's not much to tell. Not really.
It's just one aspect of you and what you enjoy to do, but of course it's not all you. You like a lot of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This podcast is all you right now. What do we do now, guys?
Oh no!
We can talk literally about anything but you, I guess.
What's the weather?
Pick the subject. So Juice, I saw recently that you had went to New York. How was your trip, man?
Trip was lovely. So going into it a little bit more, growing up, I was a military brat, so I've lived in lots of places. I was actually born in an American base in Germany. My parents are both Puerto Rican. My father is from the island and my mother is from the Bronx, but they're both like 100% Puerto Rican. So I've lived in many places and interacted with a handful of different cultures. I've lived in Germany for like 30 seconds. I'm not a German national. I don't know the language or anything. But I lived in California, then in Texas, and then in Colorado, and then in Maryland, and then in Nevada, and then in New York State on Long Island, and then back down to Arizona again. So as far as the trip to New York goes, it was nice to be in a big city again. Phoenix is technically a major United States metropolitan area and all that, but it doesn't have great transit. You're not within a 5-minute walking distance of any kind of food that you want. I have, various gripes about the city, but, overall things are fine. But visiting New York, it was just really nice. This is going to sound odd, but it was really nice to not be able to see the sky. Sort of like, that feeling that people have when they're from maybe the country and they go to a city and they're like, this is uncomfortable. I had the opposite feeling. This is great. There's so many loud, obnoxious, interesting people here. Wonderful. I can start a conversation with anyone and it's not weird. I can be myself and, be animated and a little awkward and no one thinks it's weird. This is great. It's a great place. Hey, I'd like to go way across town. Why don't I just walk underground, get in the metal crate, and I'm there and it's fine. I really enjoy the energy and the environment and the accessibility. As an able-bodied person, I understand that that's, not everyone's situation, but it's, I loved the city and, the people, I met some people that I've been talking to online for years at this point, like Tricky and Harpooneer from the Virtua Fighter community. Mm-hmm. And the guys are on the Brooklyn Video Games Arcade. Arturo Sanchez showed up and started installing FGC OS on the setups there. It was just really nice to see everyone, meet everyone again. It was a great brotherly, friendly atmosphere, and I want to go back, honestly.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it's like something is for you as soon as you're there. Like that, just something about the atmosphere, the people you're with. You're like, this feels like home, and that's really great that you kind of found that in a different place. That's amazing, especially.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying he's tapping into the FGC part of the Juicebox FGC, right?
Yes.
He's getting to live that life.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone in Arizona I ever met was super cranky because it's just so damn hot that you don't want to be bothered by anything or anyone. So.
Yeah, people in Arizona don't like it if you're too showy or anything like that, or if you're having too good of a time. People in Arizona probably didn't enjoy the Speed Racer movie. You know, like that's what I'm talking about. Like, if people in New York's like, wow, this movie is really colorful and interesting. It's for us.
This is a baby movie for babies.
This is a baby movie
says
for babies.
Arizona.
They don't like having too much fun. Okay, too much fun is.
They don't like any fun.
So,
Not that.
Trash on Arizona all day.
out of curiosity, so like getting to be there and like meeting all these really interesting figures in the FGC, which to me, when I think of the FGC, I think of New York. I'm not gonna lie. I'm also we're kind of close to New York. I lived in Connecticut. I lived near New York. When I started watching online events, it was from NLBC. So to me, like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. It comes to your name's up there. Arturo Sanchez is up there. Spooky. Those are just the regulars to me when I'm thinking of that. So, getting to see all these like really awesome players, growing up. Like, what do you think kind of it is about New York that makes the players so great?
Well, there's two answers to this question. There is the boring socio-political and economic answer, involving population density, transit, and availability of facilities. But that's a boring answer. The better answer is that there is a distinct sense of community that has been born out of those circumstances, and not every fighting game community has the hunger. You know what I mean? Like, it only takes two people to start a local. It only takes two people to start showing up and just like, hey, let's bring a console. Let's play Dragon Ball Z Budokai 3 every week forever. And then that's your local FGC, Shout outs to Bardock. But like, at some point, the players and their personalities and their situations will determine if they want to take it further. If you have 5 people that are playing Tekken 7 with each other, do one or two of you want to become way better than the other dudes? Do you start playing for money? Do you attract people from out of state to play you for money? New York has a congregation of a kind where if you want to be super hardcore about it, there are people that are on your level that will challenge you and will help you grow. Thus, we have players like IDOM getting to like the top 4, top 2 of every like major Street Fighter V tournament, and a training environment that can facilitate that sort of growth and that kind of a player. But that's not going to be everywhere. It depends on the people. It depends on a lot of factors. Some of the boring stuff does matter, but then it's like, do the people around you put you down when you win or when you get better at things? Do the people around you appreciate that and trash talk you and sort of push you to keep going? Do you hang out and say friendly things with each other after the games, and do you support each other and that sort of stuff? So, now I have to be completely transparent. I didn't visit NLBC on my last trip there. I was just completely at Brooklyn and like focused on Virtua Fighter, but I do want to go there next time. My current hope is to hopefully go to NYC again after Street Fighter 6 comes out, maybe like in the fall or early winter. I don't know if I can handle it because I'm a lizard, but around that time of year, and maybe get some Street Fighter 6 training up with those guys, where I know beyond a shadow of a doubt they will just destroy me unapologetically, and that's exactly the sort of environment that you want to be extremely strong.
Yeah.
You should surround yourself as much as possible with players that can kick your ass, but that are willing to continue playing you.
It's the old steel sharpens steel kind of adage, where like if you have other people trying to get better, pushing each other to get better, then the whole group gets better.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really feels like it's in listening to like Art and a lot of the people from that area who've been there forever, that it is a large part of that arcade culture, kind of coming into things and sort of that I think kind of builds the community aspect of what I think kind of grows New York to be such a powerhouse that it is. And Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that in anything that I've ever done, it has always been incredibly difficult to find people who are, you know, they'll beat your ass, they'll talk a little shit to you, but at the end of the day, you know, they're cool, you know, and they're not gonna, you know, where sometimes you do meet that asshole who's like, oh yeah, I think he could be better than me someday, so I'm just gonna, you know, bully him or whatever it may be. I mean, maybe that's like an incredibly specific example, but you know what I mean. Trying to, that community of like, yeah, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, we're all kind of helping each other to get better. I love that.
It's a constructive community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, like, and I think, honestly, this day and age, I think that's one of the more interesting things to talk about in kind of the evolution in fighting game and fighting game culture. Is what does the community look like in an online space? You know, how did COVID affect that? I mean, we lost some arcades, people got kind of pushed to the fringe. But then again, like, you know, 2 years time or year or two out from main COVID, you saw some online killers come up. Like, you saw the guy that went really deep from the last chance qualifier in this Street Fighter championship. You saw it like Nephew, who, like, yeah, he's gone to a couple of the locals, but he also just plays a ton online.
Yeah.
So and the same aspect, like, you know, I think it's kind of cool and kind of different, but I think the idea of community is growing with these online spaces where people can now meet in Discord and talk about things. Like, yeah, it's not the same as meeting in person.
Yeah.
But I like, Juicebox, what do you think about like the kind of evolution of that to like remote?
Well, I think that there is a correlation with sort of when you entered the FGC and how you approach like online as a learning tool. For the newer generation, online is what they started with, and it's what they are working with. So you buy a game, you have the ability to play it online, and that's how you play the game. The idea of going to someone's house or to a venue to play the game offline is supplemental. What you do with the game is you play it online at home over and over and over again, and that's how you get good at it. You know, like Halo. So
MLG Pro.
So it's like, from that perspective, that's a perfectly viable and good way to go about it. However, my perspective and my experience has been that offline is better in multiple tiny ways that can add up over time, and it can compound. Like, we were talking about the New York City fighting game community. If you routinely play offline with with people of a similar mindset, then you can build each other in a very direct way that is hard to replicate online. Now, me and you could say, let's pick up this new game, and then we could talk on Discord every day, and we could be trading tech, and that's like a very good, you know, that comes very close to it, but that's also a lot of extra effort. So it's sort of like, who just sort of turns on the game and plays online and is sort of treating it like a single player game with a gauntlet and seeing how much they can improve on their own, and how much effort do they put into the community side. And what I mean by that is reaching out to players, asking for tech, learning people's names, getting used to people's faces and their personalities, and navigating that web to sort of construct a pseudo play environment of, these are my peers and these are the people that I'm going to, you know, practice with, and we're going to build each other up in this way. So there's a dividing line there. You know, we see it all the time when it's like, is this game dead? Is this game a Discord fighter? You know, I would rather just be able to get a nameless, faceless nobody to play. That's how I want to play fighting games, which is very awkward and weird in my opinion. But I understand that sometimes you want to play to de-stress. You don't necessarily want to play to socialize or to meet new people. Like, that's not necessarily why people play fighting games, right? So there's a part of it that's understandable. You just want to play.
Yeah.
But then there's the other part of it where, okay, you want to play, but if you want to have fun, playing with people you know helps. If you want to improve, playing with people who you can talk with absolutely helps. You know, so there's a lot of elements of fighting games that are much more fun, much more intuitive, much more interesting when you know and interact with the people that you're playing with. And so there's that sort of dividing line whenever there's an online discussion about that, because some people in the discussion are not on the same side of the discussion. Some people want to play against nameless, faceless nobodies over and over, and that's just their fun. And some of us don't want that. And so when you try to keep that in mind when you encounter that particular argument that happens, because they're approaching it from a different perspective, and it's not a universal agreement.
Yeah.
But offline's better. That's my word on it. Offline's better.
You just came out and said it.
Online is a great tool, and you should use it. But offline is better. If you can drive an hour or two to play someone and it's not a terrible inconvenience, go through the effort. You might make a lifelong friend, and even if you don't, you still got some lag-free practice. And even if you didn't, at least you got to stop at the McDonald's and get a McDouble and a spicy, and you enjoyed your night. So it's worth it to go through the effort, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I hate Seattle.
That one dude living in Antarctica is shook right now. He's just his whole life, his whole outlook is blown up. No, absolutely. I mean, I think we've had other podcasts where we've talked about guests about what it's like training and trying to learn on your own, and it's such a bigger uphill battle when you don't have someone to interact with, when you don't have someone to ask that feedback of like, okay, you totally blew me up. How'd you do that? You know what I mean? Like, you can get that direct answer where, if you're sitting by yourself alone, even with the games with some of the best tools out, like the instant replays, yada, 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 it's like a crime scene. You still have to reconstruct why you lost. Like, you can't just like ask someone who probably already knows, which definitely speaks to the kind of the relational nature of teaching someone something, and how it's much easier when there's someone in the room just to be able to explain something.
Oh, you didn't know that was a tech trap? Yeah, that's why you ate shit.
You didn't see that safe jump? Sucks for you.
Block strings ain't closed. Block strings ain't closed. No.
I think that's those factors are all incredibly true. I think for me, the thing that I come across with a lot is, one, not everybody plays the same fighting game. That's a huge issue. Two, not everybody has the time to help you. And then three, where are these people and how do I find them? And those are my biggest issues for learning fighting games is like, yeah, I know some people who know how to learn this game, how to get better, how to help me get better even. But do I want to bother them, to help me? Do they even have the time to help me? And that's just, do they even, some people don't just like you, that's just a fact. They don't want to help you because for whatever reason, they don't like you. And those are just my biggest hurdles in terms of like getting better at fighting games. Because I know I need to work with someone who's better than me. I know that online only does so much for you, and sometimes you're spinning in place when you're going online. You're doing the same mistakes every time. You don't
even know where to start.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know where to start. It's just that I also know that I can go ahead and I can learn how to play bass, right? Mm-hmm. I play bass for a few years, more than a few years. Mm-hmm. But as soon as the first time I took my first lesson, I realized how many slightly small things I was doing wrong. That was able to push me to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, this is how I can change things with this song to make it so much easier. This is how I can hold my bass so my hands don't get tired. Like some people, for example, just a small example, right? Some people wear their bass very low towards their knees, right? But if it's better if you hold it how you play, right? So if I'm sitting here in this chair, right, and I hold the bass about here, this is where I want the bass to be every time when I'm standing up. So it's just certain things like that. I'm holding the neck. There's a line on the back actually that shows you this is where your thumb's supposed to be.
So much can be learned from other people's time hacks, other people's time saves, other people's like small optimizations they've made over time that you wouldn't even have thought of. But you play with them, you observe them for a minute, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's genius. That makes so much sense. You know what I mean? Like, I was over here trying to reinvent the wheel where this guy's just got something that works. And yeah, I mean, that's another thing that, like, if you're not learning in person, it's gonna be hard to know. You don't know what you don't know. You know what I mean? You can't defend against what you don't know.
I've encountered similar hurdles. I mean, it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows. And this is where where the topic becomes, hey, the fighting game community is insular. It's hard to get in. It's sometimes, depending on where you are, again, boring stuff, but it matters. Socioeconomics, politics, population density. Sometimes your community is full of assholes. Sometimes you ask someone that knows the answer, but they don't want to tell you. Now, I never want to give that answer personally. I approach fighting games as if they are an academic discipline. I feel like it is worth it approaching it along those lines. And similarly, there should be academic exchanges that occur between people who know what they're talking about to try and lift everyone up. It's the same as ideas like a peer review paper, or you always want two different teams of astronomers looking at the same stars and comparing results and things like that. So but like learning Street Fighter 4, I had to learn how to play footsies. I didn't start knowing how to play footsies. But, along the lines of the fighting game community is insular, there's also the related topic of the fighting game community needs better resources. Now, it is my opinion that the information that is out there right now on YouTube is sufficient to put together a basic construction of how to get fighting game fundamentals, but the problem with that assessment is that there's a bit of gray area in terms of like personality and play style that isn't really well documented or written down because it is inexact. It's vague by its definition. I can't really give a perspective other than my own, but my perspective is a bit odd because I don't like using something unless I know how it works and unless I know the counter to it. So even as I was learning a fighting game, I'm like, I don't want to poke with this unless I know what they can beat it with. And because of that sort of scientific approach where I'm like testing and then going to play, I developed my own method for just how to learn a fighting game. Like at this point, I know how to learn a fighting game. You can give me a brand new game that's not mechanically like any game I've ever played, and I will almost certainly be able to put the pieces together and figure out how the game should be played, at least on like a basic level. I might not necessarily like write the whole strategy guide or anything like that, but I am confident in my ability to decipher and decode a game. Not everyone is, and so the real hurdle to learning a fighting game is learning how to learn a fighting game. And that comes down to the building blocks of what happens when hitboxes interact. Do you know how to use frame data to learn what works and what doesn't work? When is it relevant? When is it not relevant? What are the multiple different ways of expressing that a move is invincible? Is it invincible because your hurt box disappears, or because it shifts, or because there's some sort of overriding property that prevents them from, working? As an example, King of Fighters used to have upper body invincibility, where just the top half of your hurt box would disappear. So if anything hit you there like a jab, you would go through it. But in KOF 15, most of those moves now have anti-air invincibility, which is to say, if you're on the ground and jab, it doesn't beat that. Your entire physical hurt box is still there, but the top half changes color, and that portion of it cannot be hit by any move that is considered airborne. So a lot of light uppercuts can now beat Terry's, for example, Terry's burn knuckle, or burn knuckle. He's airborne during that move, so you can just DP it even with a DP that isn't fully invincible because it's considered airborne. So it's like a lot of the gripes, a lot of the issues right now with going from a lower level to an intermediate player and from an intermediate to an advanced player is knowing how to divide the information into digestible chunks and knowing how to actually decipher and decode it. And there really is no great answer for that. I have developed, just my own testing methods, and technically speaking, with just training mode and enough trial and error, you can figure it out. But this is where we have to grapple with the fact that, you need the capability to do that. And it's always best to get a second opinion, get a third opinion, and you need 2 or 3 people that are interested in that level of detail, and so on and so forth. Like it's unfortunately not a genre that you can get into the detail with just by simply playing. No, you have to focus on a specific thing and test it over and over and over and compare it with other people to actually get that information that you're looking for sometimes.
So
I have kind of like a follow-up question here.
okay. Same.
So since you are very clearly like a heavy like analytical fighting player, do you feel like people who are more like based on like feelings in quotes are like at a disadvantage when they're learning a fighting game?
Yes, but only in the short term. The thing I want to stress is me being analytical doesn't make me good. It just makes me informed. Like, as an example, in Tekken, if you are -9, you're not punishable, but you're in a really bad situation where your opponent can use a quick mid or a quick low, and you can't react to either of them, and you can't step either of them. So if I know when you are -9, I know I can score at least a little damage if I choose between a quick mid and a quick low. Not everyone perceives the -9 situation as that. Some people just perceive if I'm anywhere from 0 to -9, I'm safe and I'm going to do whatever. You don't necessarily need that granularity to make a good decision when you're -9. Playing by feel works perfectly fine. At the end of the day, you have to make a choice, and people who play by feel make great choices sometimes, and sometimes they don't. And me being analytical doesn't mean I'm going to win that choice. It just means I understand the choice. I will go for down 3+4 as Kazumi, and I will get low parried and die. It's one of those things. So I desire that granularity because I want to understand precisely why everything happens. Your goal when playing a fighting game, or excuse me, when learning a fighting game, is to get to a point where no matter what happens on the screen, you understand it. There should be nothing that occurs in the game where you go, what happened there? What's going on? How did that beat that? If you are asking that question, stop playing, go to training mode, get the answer, then resume playing. Because when you know why it happened, then you are no longer grappling with the game, you are grappling with your decision right before that thing happened. And fixing those decisions is how you get better.
Yeah.
I think
Yes, I got it. Training mode.
I think that's kind of one of the beauties of the kind of, the game theory nature of fighting games is at a certain point everyone is making a guess. And while it's much more complicated than RPS, at a certain point you could call most choices in fighting games RPS. If one person is a little more educated on the situation, yeah, they could make the more optimal decision, but that doesn't stop the other player from just making a wild decision that the other player never would have guessed.
Precisely.
I think that is kind of one of the beauty of the mind, body, heart scale for fighting games, or some person's gonna make a choice because of this, some person's gonna make a choice because of this. At the end of the day, who's right, who's wrong? I don't know. Who got blown up? You know what I mean?
I did. I got blown up.
Sometimes it is that beautiful roll of the dice, and kind of how to recover from that. And yeah, I as someone who loves the theory of things too, I love the way you analytically try to break down a game. I feel like you're almost taking it to the developer level of trying to understand, the mechanics of the game building and the hurt boxes and the hit boxes. And that's well past the frame data at this point, because you're talking about like the hitbox shape. But then again, there are other players. It's just like, yeah, like they don't want to go that deep. They're just like, listen, I know I'm unsafe past this point. I'm just not going to take the attempt. You know what I mean? I'm not even going to make the try. Like, yeah, maybe I could score some points, but they min-max the decision to not want to take that chance. Then again, every now and then, they'll have that player that's just YOLO, will take that chance and blow them up. So you never know. And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful aspects of the game that I think everyone who comes to fighting games and sticks around, appreciates them, just loves that at the end of the day, like, people just throwing spaghetti at a wall and trying to turn it into gold. You know what I mean?
I mean, the end goal is fun, right? We don't want to lose sight of that. It's a video game. We're having fun. I started fighting games late teenager, early 20s, and I was a shithead. I was an asshole. I've mellowed out, okay? Knowledge is a trap. It can be very easy to fall into this idea, I know more, I should win more. Or I know more, I should be able to make better decisions. That's a trap and it's a lie. What you know is irrelevant. It's about what you do with it. And so this is sort of tangentially related with why I've been traveling so much. I don't just want to be the fighting game scientist guy, I want to play the game. I want to meet people. I want to enjoy myself. I want to, enjoy the whole thing, the full course meal that is fighting games. There were definitely periods of my life where I would just stay in training mode and learn things and type up a quick guide and be like, haha, I've contributed. But it's like, you can do that in a way that is better for your mental health, better for fighting depression, that is better for just enjoying a fighting game as much more than just a game. And that is really the thing that I'm much more focused on now. Of course, like with Street Fighter 6 coming, I want extremely accurate, very useful, very relevant information. But I'm going to try as much as possible to just be like, okay, now that you know this, what's your guess, kid? I'm gonna overhead you 5 times in a row. I'm just gonna do that. Like, I'm much more comfortable making decisions like that, especially now that I've played Virtua Fighter. More on that later. But like, the games are about the decisions. The knowledge doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean as much as you might think it does. And so it's a trap I see all the time of there will be a discussion about a particular technical detail for a particular game, and people will demonstrate their knowledge. Well, you could do this and you could do this, and based on these, you should do that. And I can't believe he did that. And it's like, well, do that situation 100 times and then talk about it again, because the math doesn't matter for the first 3 or 5 guesses. Those are effectively random. You need to even it out and start basing your decisions on their personality and by how frequently they make that decision. How frequently can you make that situation occur, and so on. The fact that you could get an 80% life bar if you guess this one thing and you should go for it might not actually ever matter if your opponent doesn't play in a way that allows that to happen or lets you make that decision. So knowledge can just lead you running in circles and just go nowhere.
Yeah. I think it's at least in my mind, summarize what you're saying. I think a lot of people can lose themselves in trying to make the optimal choice, where the optimal choice wasn't the point. It was the choice, and then how you react to what the outcomes of that choice are, I think determines more of your skill as a fighting game player than you trying to make the right choice. Because at a certain point, you're not going to make the right choice. And if you can handle that well, I think that's the first step into becoming a better player. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
I also want to point out that I feel like what you had just expressed was, living life, like it was basically a philosophy in a way.
It was deep.
It was very deep. So, and so what I got from it was learning fighting games, but learning fighting games as a vehicle to experience life is basically what you're getting at. And I see it quite a bit. And so that's sort of like, yeah, you're getting better at fighting games, but yeah, you're also meeting new people, you're experiencing new things, you're living. It's you're not just I'm not in here on my CRT just in a lab for 8 hours, whatever it may be. But I think that's really a great way to why people get into certain niches and get into like jujitsu. Like jujitsu is like another thing I can kind of think of that's similar, right? Just as like a few passing ideas, right? Here's something like practicing. Some people don't some people would rather cut off their left arm than go into training mode and practice for an hour or two, right? I kind of that was something that kind of came to mind as well. Whereas not everybody is as passionate as other people are. And oh boy, so there was so much that I was thinking about while you were speaking, and it'll all kind of come to a head probably later on. But basically I think it's really interesting that you sort of expressed how much of a philosophy fighting games are, and how many other people use a similar philosophy in different disciplines. But moving on, I wanted to, it was excellent. So as a fighting game,
it was very like mindfulness, you know what I mean? Like the most important thing is to be present, and I think that's what he was trying to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a fighting game teacher, I know you play with a lot of varying skill levels of people. What do you think some are the biggest barriers for getting newer players into fighting games? As someone from a technical aspect, that's a huge question, but I know everyone seemingly has a different answer to this. And so this one is specifically for you because, some people say, well, it's an availability issue. I personally don't think it is. I think, maybe it's a genre issue. Mm-hmm. But I honestly believe, I don't think fighting games are for everybody. I think it's just sort of like a personality type, kind of idea. But I'm curious to see what you'd say.
So I'll talk only for a little bit because this could go forever.
Yeah.
But the long and short of it is that it's a multifaceted problem, and any one small problem might be the thing that makes someone decide that fighting games aren't for them. On the larger end, in terms of in the bigger view, you were talking about jiu-jitsu and it as an avenue for improvement and experience in life.
Yeah.
Think about why, if you have children, you enroll them into youth sports. Because you hope that they will learn the value of practice. You hope that they will learn camaraderie. You hope that they enjoy, the taste of victory and the experience of bitter defeat. You're hoping that it will build character and that, that they can get something out of it, right? Or maybe they just like baseball. But
sure.
Seriously, that's important. Some people just like baseball and they don't really care about the details, right? It is absolutely and completely fine for someone to get into a fighting game because it's like, hey, that chick is hot. I want to play as her. And similarly, it's perfectly fine to say, you know what? Based on my experience in my, playing this game and that game, I believe that game is much more of a system-based game, and I might enjoy that one a little bit more. Here's my $40 American. Yes, please, I'd like to play it online. Thank you, please. There's many different ways of getting into a fighting game. But when it comes to helping new players get in, I think the biggest, most important thing is developers just need to make cooler, better games. Street Fighter 6 is already well on its way. I'm very excited for 6 because there's a lot of stuff that's just going to be working on day one as it should. On day one, working crossplay. On day one, a functional ranked mode that isn't made up of 50, 60 different ranks. It's just made of 5 or 6 major ranks with mini subdivisions. And the very good players will separate themselves in a month or two, and then all the lower level players will be at the lower ranks and they will, help each other from that perspective. We can talk about complicated inputs, but that's not really important. People will learn what they think is cool. We can talk about netcode, and that's important. Overall, the quality of netcode has greatly improved. We're sort of on the tail end of what I might call the first rollback revolution, where almost everyone now has rollback in their games and understands that it should be in the games. So now as the next games are coming, it should be better implemented rollback that works over greater distances with fewer desyncs and so on and so forth, right? They should be mastering and improving what is out there now, and that will maybe lessen some of those complaints. We can talk about pad versus joystick. We can talk about your local community, or your local community is small or large or infested with assholes, not infested with assholes. We can talk about I live 10 minutes away from someone who I can chat with about the game, who understands the game, or I can click on someone in Discord and they don't mind me and they're willing to chat with me about it, and people who don't have access to that resource. Any one of these hurdles and many more could be the reason for someone to say, I'm not enjoying my time with fighting games. If I have anything constructive to add to this discussion, it's more along the lines of everyone should find the game that they have the most affinity with for any reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will ask me, I want to get into fighting games. Which fighting games should I learn? And I'm like, all of them. Sample them. You're at a buffet. It's not about picking the right or the wrong game. Try as many as you like, because you might find out that you like boring, you like really boring characters that wear a white karate gi and a black belt and just say boring generic karate phrases, and it turns out you are now a Virtua Fighter master because Akira's right there. His story is literally occupation, kung fu. Likes, kung fu. Like, that's it. That's him. But you might like heavy metal music, and so you feel an affinity for Guilty Gear. You might really hate the New York Knicks, and so you get into Marvel vs. Capcom 2. You might really enjoy.
What a reference.
You might be a man of culture and enjoy, the look of a fine woman wearing a fine suit. And so you get into the character King from King of Fighters and so on and so forth. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about Viper, because she's Red Mommy, but...
I'm talking about, what is it?
What if I enjoy standing on one side of the arena while my opponent stands on the other side of the arena? We just throw fireballs at each other the whole time.
Play Deadshot, Injustice 2.
Oh my god.
So
there it is, NRS games.
Yeah.
I should have known.
Oh, NRS.
Now that's a fair question. Like, NRS meets your definition, but there's a Marvel game that meets that definition. There is a particular Street Fighter game that might meet that. That's why it's important. You got to sample at the buffet, try as much as possible, and you want to stumble on a game and be like, this is more fun than I thought. This is more fun than I thought. Wow, I actually enjoy experimenting in this game. I enjoy losing in this game. When you start enjoying things around the game other than just winning and doing well, that's a sign that it's a game that you can take further, that you can enjoy spending more time with. And I think that not everyone has found that. They'll say, well, the new Tekken's coming, I'll try that one. The new Street Fighter's, I'll try that. I'll try Dragon Ball FighterZ. It's like Marvel. I don't really like Marvel. And the truth is, for some people, that game that is perfect for them might not exist yet. But I also want to stress not to ignore indie fighting games. Try Fantasy Strike. Try Merfight. Try Skullgirls. Try Punch Planet. We can talk about how they have smaller scenes and it might be more difficult to find that stuff, but finding any fighting game that you have an affinity with will greatly expand your appreciation for the genre and will make it easier for you to appreciate other fighting games as well.
Yeah. Or you could be an anime player who just plays everything.
Yeah, but screw Fantasy Strike.
Yeah.
And
the guy that makes that's an asshole.
The waifus aren't gonna appreciate themselves. I got to do the appreciation for them, and the only way to do it is just by playing.
Fatal Cutie.
But to piggyback on that, I think I don't know what it is about gamer culture, but I think with fighting games it becomes even more apparent that people care way too much about their win-loss ratio, and it's like that's not even the first step. Like, you have to, if you want more wins, you have to learn how to win. Like, I think a better mindset would be, you get more out of a game by practicing mechanic that game. And if you've gotten better at the mechanic over the course of that match, then, you don't worry about if you win or loss. Worry about if you got better at the mechanic, because that's going to improve your overall gameplay. That's going to contribute to more wins later on down the line. I can't remember what great sports whatever said this, but it's just you just see the wins at the end of the day. I've lost more at this game than you're ever going to. I kept going. I learned from it.
I believe it's the Bruce Lee quote. I do not fear the man that's practiced 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that's practiced one kick 10,000 times.
Exactly.
So I'm probably misquoting it, but
right. I think that's pretty about
fighting
right.
games are just 90% losing in general. You just lose, you learn a little bit, you lose, you learn a little bit, and then eventually you win one. You're like, hell yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
The losses contribute to the wins. Learn,
exactly.
If you can learn something from every game, that's a bigger win than just flipping a coin and winning and I don't know why I won, but I won.
You're just filling your little XP bar, and then when it gets full, you win a match.
But was the loss fun because you got to stand on the opposite side of the screen and throw fireballs?
Also
important. If the losses are fun, you're going to proceed. This mindset issue. Mindset is critical.
Yeah.
And there's really no way around that discussion where it's where does your mindset come from? Well, it comes from your life circumstances. It comes from your mental health. It can come from your physical health. When we say that life experience is helpful for fighting games, it matters a lot. And that's probably one of the hurdles in terms of, if you come to fighting games as a video gamer and you're used to just being able to demonstrate your skill and then the game provides you entertainment, fighting games don't really align with that. And they can, it's possible, but you have to be good for it to get there. And of course, there will always be people better that can just defeat you on any day, and sometimes you can have a bad day. Like, the wins and the losses are nowhere, they're not actually even almost relevant to your experience with a fighting game. What's more important is the content of every match. And it's like, was it fun? Was it dynamic? Was it engaging? Was there a cool video effect? Did you hear a new song that you haven't heard before? Like in KOF, the music will change if the rival comes up. I'm Kyo and I beat your first two characters, then Iori comes up and then the theme changes. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't know this song was in the game. And you enjoyed that match even though Iori came back and reverse OCV'd your team. So, there's a lot of what... God, it just sucks having to say that what happens on the screen doesn't matter. It matters a lot, but it also really, really, really depends on how you choose to perceive it. Right. Perceiving it as a loss is extremely, it's ultimately shallow. Like, you can even say it was a loss, but I lost for these reasons. I lost, but I had fun. I lost and I'm mad. I will go cool off and come back. There's lots of productive ways of using and perceiving loss.
I think that was
I prefer to keep rage playing and stack losses.
I do too, yeah. I think that was something that oh my god, Giuna said too once, was essentially like, okay, here's how I play, right? He made it really simple. I lose, I don't get mad, I keep playing. I lose, I get mad, I stop playing. You stop, because sometimes if you lose and you get mad, you kind of stop learning. There's a certain point where your anger is more distracting than what's going on. I think that's really important. But also,
it's the angry Punko mad now meter.
Well, except he just gets, for some reason, he gets better. He gets buffs for whatever reason. And the shirt comes off, the nipples, they distract you.
Literally buffs. Did you see his muscles bulge when he can that shirt away?
I think my favorite match with him ever is when the dude won, I don't know if you remember this, and he took his shirt off against Punko. And then Punko beat him. He came back, he took his shirt off and put it on his shoulder.
It's like you needed this more than me.
The greatest things ever. You put it on his shoulder. Oh, man. But yeah, also to add to that, I think a portion of fighting game players that are heavily neglected are the people that play the single player games, right? They're not necessarily looking at it from a lot of our perspectives either, where it's sort of like, they're just here to, see some cool stuff and play Bloody Roar. They don't really like playing against people because that's not fun to them. So they I feel like they're playing a different game, literally and figuratively.
In a way they are. Their experience isn't as affected by, the community. And there have been a lot of really good single player fighting games, by the way. The Dragon Ball Z Budokai series I keep thinking about. Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution on PlayStation 2 is an excellent single-player experience. Like, the quest mode is set up in a way, it's like, go to this arcade, beat their best guy. Now go to that arcade, beat their best guy. You've been challenged by this guy. And the tutorial teaches you the entire fucking game from top to bottom.
It's been so long since I played Evolution, but that's when, yeah, absolutely. I love Go in that game.
Yeah. After pushing rollback, we got to start pushing the games need better tutorials train. That needs to
yeah.
Get over.
You can just look at Eunice and be like, we're gonna copy that. That's a good tutorial.
Strive has a pretty excellent tutorial as well.
It does have a very good one, yes.
So if you were, for you in particular, as someone who's championed a lot of fighting games, what is it that specifically attracts you to fighters, And can you narrow down the ingredients that makes a fighting game worth playing to you? Because first of all, I could say worth playing, and that could mean a lot of different things, of course. But if you could be, sort of like specific, what is it about Virtua Fighter or even KOF that is like, yes, this is the game for me. This is why I got to play both these games.
Sure. So, I started my actual competitive journey like with Street Fighter 4. I know I said I started with Melee, but Melee was just sort of super casuals. I'm like, ooh, I get to play this guy with a sword. Roy's better than Marth. Roy's better than Marth. He's terrible. Oh my god.
Controversial take for sure.
Hey, his sword is it's a one-hit kill if you charge it on whip. You just gotta wait.
If you hold B all the way, it's a one-hit kill.
But it's also this long, and Mars is like this long. I mean, come
it
on.
Explodes. It's got the
You gotta
explode
tell your
button.
opponent, listen, stand right there. Just wait. I got you. Something's coming. I got you. Just stay right there. Wait.
You think you're good? Wait till I charge.
L cancel into B hold. Sup?
Oh man, but like. My actual competitive, I enjoyed Melee, but I quickly recognized that the game wasn't fun when I started to try and play it really well against players that were really good. Street Fighter 4, I learned a lot. I started to play it against people that were good, and it stayed fun. This is related to that previous discussion, by the way. It's, sometimes you can be okay at fighting games and enjoy fighting games, and then you start to really delve into them, and then they become less fun, either because of work necessary or training necessary or particular people that you play against over and over again, particularly online, or particular play styles you come across. Like Street Fighter 4 stayed fun for a few years. For me, maining Abel, experimenting with other characters, that was around that time I started Twitch streaming and interacting with the community. 4 was fun for me, in particular, going to tournaments and landing that Ultra, and I'm like, yeah, let's go. But after Street Fighter 4, so Street Fighter 4 before Ultra came out, I'm like, I'm not enjoying this game as much anymore. And part of that, I'll be honest, was because I wasn't winning as much anymore. But I wanted to branch out, and I'm like, there's other fighting games. I think I was playing Tekken 6 a little bit at the time. It was around that time that KOF, the one after 11 but before 13 that we don't talk about. That particular KOF was coming out, and I'm like, oh, KOF, what's that? I'll give it a try. But that particular game was a travesty, a trash fire, the worst netcode in the history of console fighting games, and among other things. So KOF 13 came after that, and I'm like, okay, I want to try this game. And KOF gave me an appreciation for execution and for speed that I felt was not commonly shared in Street Fighter. Street Fighter as a game teaches you a lot of things that are possible, but then it tells you don't do most of it. I know you can forward dash, but you shouldn't, because you might die. You can backdash, but unless you do it on wake up, it's pointless. If you're in the poke range and you backdash, you're just taking risk. You're allowing people to do things. You're allowing people to throw fireballs. So don't forward dash, don't backdash, just walk. Yes, you could jump, but if you're wrong, you die. So don't do that either, okay? Your goal is to waddle back and forth, slightly adjusting your range by a few pixels until they make a mistake that you can take advantage of, or making the big bets on the dashes and the jumps, or like on a raw special move. And different characters are designed in different ways so that maybe they don't have to waddle as much. But not all matchups are like that. It can greatly depend on characters. But what Street Fighter tends to teach you is to play conservatively. KOF was a game that showed me the opposite perspective. KOF was a game that says, hey, if someone jumps at you, you don't have a move that wins by default. You might have it, but because hyper hops exist, you have to be really fast. You have to wield the skill to be able to use it in time. You can't just DP a jump. It's harder than that. You have to DP all of these jumps all the time. So people are gonna jump at you. Maybe you should anti-air with your jumping moves, since jumping is less committal. There's two different kinds of jumps. Doing a full jump is a decent anti-air against a hop if you attack down, or you can neutral hop or backwards hop. And we're not even talking about characters. That's just how the game works. You can forward run, and you can do anything out of a run you want at all, except block. What game do you think this is? Don't block, move around. do stuff. Figure out what particular thing your opponent has trouble with and beat them because you have identified that and you have the skill to abuse that. Rather than Street Fighter teaching you, here's your character, here are the buttons you should press and the buttons you shouldn't press, except in very specific situations and matchups. Here's the strength of the special moves you should use, and you should never use the light version of it, always use the heavy of it. Here's the jump you should not use unless you also have a dive kick. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's all this, you learn this stuff so that you know only when very specifically to do specific things. Otherwise, you need to play in that conservative way. And KOF says, if they can't handle you running at them, run at them. If they can't handle your hops, hop at them. If they can't handle you as Clark doing armor grab all day, take them to space. Like, just do it. Do whatever you need to do to win, rather than only do what is necessary to win. Now, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is KOF does everything Street Fighter does, but better.
No.
Ooh.
So I want to be very, very clear that we are still talking about my taste here.
Sorry, yeah. I apologize. I just want to hear it.
This is a take he's had before that we've had.
It's easy. Based on the way that I explain it, like, it's easy to sort of hear this and be like, how is KOF not like a bigger, better, more interesting game? And what I will say is Street Fighter is interesting because matchups are presented as challenges. Zangief versus Dhalsim is a challenge. The thrill of victory you get as a Zangief overcoming that challenge is sublime. It's amazing. It's what makes the bad matchup engaging and worth trying. Now, if you go to a tournament and it's only 2 out of 3, or if it's SBO and it's best of 1, you want to pick a character that doesn't give you a weakness. And even in every fighting game, including KOF, you want to pick strong characters if your goal is to win, particularly money and prizes, and you don't have a bunch of games to work with. But counterpicking rules are designed around this idea that, well, you can't switch your character. You have to demonstrate mastery if your opponent is willing to switch to a different skill set. And so Street Fighter is designed around these characters have obvious strengths and obvious weaknesses, and you have to cover those weaknesses. That is why Street Fighter is interesting. Whereas KOF is designed around most characters can do a lot of the same stuff. Are you better at your opponent at the general game, or would you like to try being better at them at the more specialized game? Maxima is very slow, but he has lots of armor moves. He can play the basic KOF game, but because he is slower, he's a little easier to anti-air. He's a little easier to poke from far away. He's a little easier to throw fireballs at. So some of his general KOF stuff is weaker, but he can anti-air just by pressing heavy punch at the right time, because in KOF, when you armor something, you don't lose any health. It doesn't cost health to use armor. Mm-hmm. You can armor cancel into supers in KOF 13 and in some other games. His jumping normals, although his jumps are slow, are extremely massive and can be used better for defensive applications than offensive applications. There's elements in KOF that resemble the Street Fighter sort of specific matchup-y thing that are optional to your experience that you may enjoy more. But KOF tends to be more about who is generally better at running, poking, jumping, getting an ambiguous cross-up. It's sort of like Tekken in that regard. There's so many characters in Tekken, right? But if you whiff and your opponent launches you, regardless of character, they won that interaction, right? But there's no, in Street Fighter, it's like, if I'm Zangief and you're Ryu, I have to play it this way. If I'm Zangief and you're Dhalsim, I have to play it that way. So Street Fighter is interesting and fun because of the challenges it presents to you towards the mastery of your character. KOF is interesting and fun because your general skill is constantly tested at all times, and you have the option of introducing specialized skills based on the matchup or some sort of specialized knowledge if you think that would help you in the moment, but the general skill is more important. And the game speed also speaks to that. Like, you can act in real time more often because there's way more movement options that are safe or can be made more safe. Whereas in Street Fighter, it's like, if you don't want to walk, almost everything other than walking represents fairly significant risk, especially with enough meter on the screen. So KOF is like, do more stuff. You can find out more about what your opponent can do and can't do. Maybe you'll find that they are weak against certain characters, or they hate taking grabs, or that they mash at certain times. And that, to me, to my taste, was more interesting, more engaging, and represented to me an evolution of what I had learned from Street Fighter. And it's like, okay, now I have to press buttons faster. I have to make decisions faster. Sometimes I need to be ahead of my opponent by a couple of steps to even get a mix-up to work. Because if I don't jump at this time, I'm not going to get this blocked hop CD, and then I can't get the running low mix-up. KOF fit. It was new. It was an interesting new world to me, and so I loved it. I loved it. And then KOF 14 happened, and it isn't as technically interesting as 13 in my view, but that's fine. KOF 15 is a lot more fair. It's a lot more standardized. Damage isn't as crazy across the cast. EX moves are very, very good, but they're a little cheaper than they were in 13. We can talk about KOF 15 and say, oh, it's Cronin and Jenny and whatever, and Xiaohai's the best in the world. But overall, it's a pretty well-balanced game. And even the characters that are kind of weird and don't seem good, like how Maru, Antonov, Maxima, again, they have their uses. They're still fun to play. They still represent those interesting challenges if you want to incorporate them. So KOF 15 is a very well-made game. But throughout the years, I had played some Tekken, and I like Tekken, but I don't love it. And the reason I don't love it is because I was learning Tekken at around the same time as KOF, and I saw elements of KOF in it where it's like, oh, I have a large move list. I can see which of my strings my opponent knows and doesn't know. I can steal turns. If they know the third hit is unsafe, then I'll just do 2 hits, stop, and start again. There's lots of play space in Tekken that is possible, but also you can just block everything. Blocking is safe. It's what you can do all the time. You can move and block at the same time, assuming your execution is good. And so Tekken is teaching you block a lot, because you'll either get frame advantage, or you get a block punish, or you get to move while blocking. So while doing all this, you can also make them whiff, and then you can get 30, 40, 50%, or 80% if you're Geezer or Kuma and there's a wall, or 100% if there's 2 walls. And so on. So Tekken was enjoyable after what I had learned about KOF, but there were also elements of it that reminded me of Street Fighter, or it's like, yeah, you could do that, but maybe you should just do less, and that would be smarter. And what I recognized after learning KOF, and around the time I was learning Tekken alongside KOF, is it's like, I like it when the game tells me to do more. I don't like it when the game tells me to do nothing because that's smarter. You know? There's always the element of hedging your bets. If you play Texas Hold'em, you don't always have to bet. You don't always have to call. You can just check. You can just see what the vibe around the table is. You don't always have to go in every hand. But there are times when you should, and there are times when you shouldn't. But even in poker, there's it evens out. But I feel like a lot of the time in Tekken, and in many matchups in Street Fighter, 80-90% of the time you should do very little, and only do what you should do at those precise moments, and protect your life as much as possible otherwise. And I recognize that element of fighting games wasn't to my taste. I don't want to hedge my bets. I don't necessarily want to be making big bets and big calls all the time either, but I want the game to tell me that sometimes I should do that. And I also want the game to tell me that when I do that, it absolutely will pay off if I have the meter or if I have the conversion, that some characters are better at it, that some characters are worse at it. Make it an element of the design that sometimes you should be stupid.
You like the RNG, like the sort of, no, I don't want to say RNG, but you like the sort of the intense interactions. Yeah, you want to press buttons. You want to
he likes the buttons.
It's primarily about interaction. If fighting games are about choices, how can we make those choices as interesting and multifaceted as possible? Enter Virtua Fighter.
Oh no.
Here we go.
I definitely, yeah. So would you also say there's a relationship between tag fighters, like fighters where you have more than one character and it's not just your only life, giving you a little bit more freedom to be like, oh man, I'm going to do something crazy, and if it doesn't work, I have another character?
It depends on the game and how free-flowing its mechanics are. Like the way Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite works, where just at sort of any point it could be the other character, is crazy and nuts and increases interaction, and it increases the decision space, and it makes it harder for you to predict your opponent. So I like that. But if you think about like, for example, Marvel 2, when you call an assist, it's just sort of an extra special move that you have. So you're fighting Cable and this one special move from Psylocke. You're fighting Cable and this one special move from, Sentinel. So it will depend more on the individual mechanics of the game, but in general, the wider the decision space for me, the more interesting. Now, it can get too wide. It can get completely nuts, but that's where Virtua Fighter taught me my limits on that. And it turns out I have a very extreme high limit compared to other people. But Virtua Fighter taught me that you can make a game that is about two players playing each other. And you don't have to make a game around who is better at their character or who is better at micro interactions. You can just make a game that is all about who just gets the read. And that game can still be extremely engaging, extremely rewarding. Even if it feels a little bit like just gambling, it's still extremely difficult to be consistent at it, and that strive to be consistent at a game that is inherently inconsistent is appealing to me. And that also partially probably the appeal of many tag fighters. It's like, you can't control everything that they do. You can't necessarily kill the assist every time it happens, but when it does happen, it's so awesome when it does happen. So I don't want to delve too deep into the mechanics of Virtua Fighter, and if you are interested, check out my stream, tweet at me sometimes, I'll be happy to explain it. But Virtua Fighter is designed in a way where every character has all the basic tools and movement and defense. Just basic defense allows you to layer your defense in a way where you can always cover 2 and sometimes 3 options at a time. If I know that I'm -4, then I know that I can block a mid and duck a throw and evade an attack after the timing of that mid-throw window with one single sequence of inputs. But I'm making that decision to do that precisely because I'm -4 and precisely because I think you will do one of those things. But if you do something else, it's going to create a different situation that I have to react to, and it's going to get scrambly. So Virtua Fighter is about, can you create scrambles? Because there's a lot of very good, very strong defensive options that you have. So how can you weaken your opponent's defense? You can't switch characters. Everyone's defense is functionally on that basic level equal. And then some characters have additional options, parries, sabakis, counters, things like that. Some characters have like additional movement options, like when your back is towards your opponent in VF, just the same as Tekken, it's terrible. But some characters actually have a back-turned counter. It only works on mids, but this character, while back-turned, can still discourage a mid, assuming they're not like -20 while back-turned or whatever. Or you can't sidestep while you're back-turned, but the character Shun Di, the Drunken Master, can sort of crumple down and roll away, and he can escape highs and certain mids while back-turned. And so there's lots of specific things like that can matter, but they all add spice to general interactions and situations that happen every round all the time. So you're constantly being put in these repeated situations over and over and over. You're -4, you're +3, you're -6, you're +9, you're +6 on side, you're -2 on side. You got your half circular, you have +9 side. You now know that they cannot evade dash cancel the delayed jump kick, but will they go for this? Will they go for that? Anywhere you are in the -9 to +9 range, there's always 2 or more choices that you could make that will win. Being minus in Virtua Fighter, it doesn't mean that you need to block. You can block, or you can evade, or if you have a punch, counter, or sabaki, those tend to start up in a frame or two, so you can do those. If they're going to attack with a high, you can still duck it. If they're going to attack with a low, you can still jump it. If they're going to attack with a mid, you could block it as one way of getting your turn back, but again, you could also evade it and do other things. So you're always represented at all times with 2 or 3 or more things you could do. This fast. Make a decision. Make a decision. Make a decision. Make a decision. And that that is just RPS. 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 Round 2. RPS. 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 Round 3. But every decision within that RPS requires different amounts of forethought, execution, and awareness.
and observing your opponent probably becomes a bigger and bigger aspect of that, because if you have at least some way above 50% to have an idea of what you think they'll do, it's going to pay off in you making the more optimal decision.
Yeah, like I wanna compare it to the way fighting games tend to feel these days. Look at a game like Street Fighter V or Guilty Gear Strive. Shout out to the Ives. Think about how a round starts in those games. Round 1, fight. Do I want to do something? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, but let's say we both don't. Okay, we are in neutral. What should we fight with? There's this lull, this pause, the silence before the clash. In Dragon Ball Z, this is when the wind would blow and the pebble would roll by.
Tumbleweed.
Right? And it's just like, okay, we are going to fight.
It's like
but
5 episodes.
Even though it says round 1 fight, we might not have started fighting yet. Someone will then jump, and the other person will anti-air, and the fight has begun in earnest. One of us has made a decision to try and engage, or we both engage at the same time, and then there's a scramble that happens after that. If we trade in the air, will one of us decide to then come back in immediately, or will one of us decide to try and wait and counter that, or will we both wait? Many fighting games...
What is a scramble? I've always wanted to, I've never heard the exact definition of a scramble.
It's a vague term. People will define it differently, but when I say scramble, what I'm talking about is when you and your opponent interact and you get a situation that is not necessarily clearly defined, and you have to decide if you want to act immediately as a response to that situation. Like, I'm sure it's happened that you've traded with your opponent where you hit each other and then you attack right away. That's a scramble. It is technically a practicable, reproducible situation, and you can know if after this trade I press crouch and medium kick and they press jab, what happens? What if I press crouch medium kick and they press crouch medium kick? It's a scramble along the lines of you are presented with the opportunity to make a choice, but it's not necessarily in your favor. Will you still make a choice anyway, or will you decide not to choose, which is another choice, right?
It's like a non-optimal, fighting from your back foot. Do I just wait and block, or do I do something crazy? Kind of.
It's like if someone taps the back of your shoulder, do you turn around with your elbow or do you slowly turn? That's sort of what I mean by a scramble. But a lot of fighting games are designed around there being break periods between your interactions. If in Tekken you can back away, you're not interacting until one of you chooses to. In Street Fighter V, one of you could dash in and go for jab or throw, but you could also not. And if you're fighting Dhalsim, the Dhalsim has a very big interaction range. He can interact with you from far away, but you can counter poke him from far away. But the question is, will Dhalsim press a button or will he not? When will you start interacting? When will you make a decision to dash at that Dhalsim or attempt to counter poke that Dhalsim? Or are you waiting for that interaction? In Virtua Fighter, that exists, but it is optional. Virtua Fighter says round 1, start. The round start range is very specific because every character can hit each other at the round start range. If you try and get out of that range, you have to backdash, which has a counter hit state on it, a terrible counter hit state on it, and characters can get 40-50%. But you can layer it, you can backdash into an evade, but by evading, you are necessarily sidestepping, and every character has moves that track to my chest or to my back or both directions. The way moves that track work in Virtua Fighter, they counter hit if they step that way. It's a digital interaction. If you saw their step, you get counter hit, and that normally leads to a natural combo knockdown or a side turn situation, and side advantage is better than front advantage. So it doesn't matter how you start a round. There is a decision I can make with my character that will beat that round start and can lead into a knockdown into Oki into a 50% guess. Or I can just get the 50% guess right at round start if I know exactly how you're going to start the round. Does that make sense? It is impossible to do that in a lot of modern fighting games. Or should I say, I can anticipate that you will start a round in Tekken by backdashing, but there's only so much I can do to actually discourage you from that decision. I can go for round start low a lot, but low parry exists and the reward is not in my favor. The thing about reward and risk and how you choose what things are worth doing is that in Virtua Fighter, there's always a point where something is worth doing. Especially at round start, because round starts tend to be, round start tends to be the situation in Virtua Fighter where it's like, I might not want to take too much risk. But if they always do backdash and then step towards your back, you can do forward dash, half circular, and you might have just won the round. Rounds are very fast. You don't have much life. You can end a round in like 2 wall combos or one combo, or just one hit near the edge of a ring. So Virtua Fighter is presenting the opportunity for you to make big bets frequently if you are willing to make very specific reads on what your opponent likes to defend with and how they like to move. And if you're not willing to make that, there are lower risk, lower reward strategies you can go for, but it always exists that your opponent could make a high level specific read on your relatively low risk choices that can lead still into a big reward for them. So the game is literally telling you, if you play too safe, that's bad. Being safe is not a virtue in and of itself. Being safe opens you up in multiple ways. And loosely speaking, this can be true in many fighting games. If you play too safe in Street Fighter, you might let a dash get past you. You might miss an anti-air, or you might take a lot of chip. But the game does not say, oh, you're playing too safe, you should stop. Guilty Gear, classic Guilty Gear had a mechanic called negative penalty, where if you kept walking away from your opponent, it would just empty your meter. But you can play it in a way where you stay away, but you're still interacting with them and you avoid that negative penalty. So you can still create lulls and you can still play in a patient way. But Virtua Fighter just makes it, there's no meters in Virtua Fighter. There's your life, timer, and rounds. That's it. The character Shundi has a unique drink mechanic where he unlocks more of his move list. But outside of that one edge case, there's no meters. You just have your move list, and you can do the whole thing at any time, whenever you want, whenever it's appropriate. So what will you choose? It's up to you. Immediately, Virtua Fighter becomes about your play style and how you want to play it. Once you understand the mechanics, it's like, jab leads to this situation. The counters for that situation are these. My counters for this situation are those. Will I pick from here, or will I stay basic? Or will I let the moment pass and create a scramble, chaos situation? Will I test my opponent's ability to react to a non-situation? A non-situation doesn't matter in a 2D fighting game because there's tons of non-situations in 2D fighting games. You can just decide not to fight for a little bit. You can decide not to interact. But in VF, every moment of every round, all the time, represents the possibility for an explosion. And you cannot afford to not take the risk sometimes, and you cannot afford to ignore it. It has completely changed my perspective of what is fun about fighting games, put frankly.
and you know, it when I hear you talk about it and how passionate you are about Virtua Fighter, it makes it so disappointing how Virtua Fighter has been doing, you know, business-wise. Though, strangely enough, I hear things like, well, Virtua Fighter did gangbusters on downloads on the PS4 for free, but it's like, well, why can't we at least get a Virtua Fighter 6? And it's like, and then that answer is kind of ambiguous to whether we're going to get that or not. A lot of people say we're not, you know, and it's kind of more of opinions that I'm getting is like, no, we're not going to get one. What do you think? You think we're going to get a Virtua Fighter 6?
I mean, here's how I would perceive that. Mm-hmm. We're currently in a media climate where nostalgia is at an all-time high. Yep. People would rather rehash old things and make them a little better than make completely new things. This is true for everything, from TV shows to movies to video games and everything else, right? So when I talk with passion about Virtua Fighter and its mechanics and its systems and what it's done for me as a player, I'm talking about it as if it were like a classic black and white movie that's still a 4-star excellent movie today. I'm talking about something that is old but still good. And so we can say, yeah, it got downloaded 10 million times, but it was free. People didn't have to pay for that. It was free if you had PS Plus for a few months, right? What we can say is merely that people know that Virtua Fighter exists. People know who Akira is. People more or less know who Jackie is and Pi and Lao a little bit, and then it's like, who's Eileen? Wait, who's Lei Fei? You know, as a brand, Virtua Fighter exists. People know about it, and people in the fighting game community are like, oh, it's that old thing that people used to play. It's that game that Ryan Hart was really good at years ago. But it's not really a present fixture. It's just an old thing that's still good. Yeah. The new release is literally a touched up old thing that's still good. It's just Final Showdown with a fresh coat of paint and really good new music, by the way. But
and old music.
Virtua Fighter, it's just sort of there. It's not a new thing. We merely know that it exists. So, are we in a position to hope for a new Virtua Fighter? Only kinda, sorta. We have some interviews with the producer, Aoki, who has very obviously been trying not to say things, very obviously trying to not answer questions. We got Harada, hey, I made you some takoyaki. It's in the shape of a number 6. What do you think? And he's like, oh, it looks delicious. Let me eat that and drink my beer and not talk about it. You know, like, I understand. If I were a dev, I would understand. You don't want to get people's hopes up and say that you're making something that you're not. But you also don't want to kill the possibility of a thing happening if you're not making it. You can't be like, I know we're not making Virtua Fighter 6 and you should bring your hopes down. You can't say that. You don't want to do that to people. But if you're making it, you can't say that you are making it. So it's just that Sega has just been a tiny bit more willing to tweet about Virtua Fighter. The producer himself has tweeted about meeting, the overseas players at EVO Japan, and in fact, the interaction between like American and Japanese VF players was amazing. We have been talking a lot since the release of Ultimate Showdown. Some people have been learning Japanese. I've been trying to like learn a little bit, and it's like I want to go over there and play, but they are genuinely excited to be able to play with us regardless of the skill gap, because there's a definite one. But it's just about love and appreciation for the game, for us, for the Virtua Fighter community as it currently exists, part of which still existed way back then. And I'm one of the newer people. I learned the game just under 3 years ago. That's when I started. So should we have hope for VF6? A little, but just as much as we should have hope for Super Mario RPG 2. Just as much as we should have hope for God Hand 2.
Oh God,
those are all soul shattering. What are you doing?
I'm just saying there are old things
I've completely accepted.
There's no way in hell we're ever getting a God Hand 2.
Mario RPG 2? Mario RPG 2
right
never.
Here,
never
right
Mario
now?
RPG 2.
All I'm saying, there are old things that are good, that are still good, that we still love, that there are still fans of. Should those fans have hope for the future? They should. We shouldn't get our hopes too high, but Virtua Fighter is in a better position than Mario RPG 2. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, it's a little bit more inside the realm of possibility now that Sega has been interacting with its own brand in that way. And I personally think we will see a Virtua Fighter 6 within the next 2 to 4 years. I would like it to be within the next year or so, like just a teaser of a number 6 or something. We were all hoping it would be at EVO Japan, but I think that Sega is reaching a point. They keep rehashing Persona and Sonic and all this other stuff. They know that they should leverage their IPs, and they know that VF is one of those IPs. They just weren't sure if they should. Now they know that the brand has recognition, so now they're thinking about it, and that's about as far as we know.
I think now with Tekken 8 coming out, maybe they can kind of piggyback off that a little bit, at least getting the momentum going in terms of like 3D fighters. I know that might be a little bit of a stretch, but
I think it's also that classic problem. Sorry, Quentin, did you have a...
Oh, no, I was just gonna drop a little thing, like, Harada's gonna be like talking mad shit. Be like, yeah, no, I got Tekken 8 going.
I honestly
how's VF6, huh?
That Harada's coming at things with, like... I feel like he just stopped giving a fuck at this. Well, not that he has
so hard.
But I mean, he's just stopped giving a fuck, but he's also like in a competitive mindset as well, and I think that's what fighting games need.
We really needed like a developer like him to just be like, hey, all this shit's happening.
We're gonna drop more
cool
characters than Capcom. Suck it.
Yeah, it is cool that the developer has. I mean, you're so used to these nameless faceless companies, and it's very cool to see a developer out there being a face, being a personality, interacting in the community, even if it's on his terms. I mean, it's just cool to see. I think like coming from the pre or the earlier mid 2000s, memory of game development, the companies would never talk to people. They would announce something like 3 to 5 years out and be like, it's coming in 3 to 5 years, guys, just wait.
Maybe.
And it's like you've already burned through all the hope and the hype, and by the time the thing finally comes out, you don't even care anymore. But now I think a lot of the companies are a lot more aware of what is a realistic expectation, not only to put on the audience, but in terms of community interaction. And it's all gotten better because of it. You know, most games that are coming out are announced within like 2 years or less of their release. And I think that's infinitely better now for how gamers feel about games, because no one wants to hear about a thing that's coming in 5 years. Like it's way too far out.
And plus,
Watch Dogs energy.
Yeah, go
Mario RPG 2 was a terrible example because there have been many Mario RPGs since Super Mario RPG. Now that I think about it,
Not like the original.
Saga. What up?
Yeah, we don't have a sequel with Mallow and Gino and Tadpole Pond and Nimbus Land, but we right. But we do have lots of Mario RPGs, so that was fine. What's much more likely than like a VF6 is honestly Akira and Tekken 8. Or like
that as well.
Oh, good call.
I honestly think the best fit for Tekken 8 would be Go, Hinogami. Harada very specifically said, that was a really cool character design, and I'm pissed off I didn't think of it. So in the same way that he respects the design of Go, he also said the same thing to SNK about Geese, and look where that led.
Yeah.
So cool.
Literally, SNK read that interview where he called Geese cool, and SNK called him and said, let's talk. That's literally what happened. So,
Geese,
maybe Harada is actually talking at Sega. Like, they're clearly talking already. So, Harada has his fingers in various things. And I'm excited for, like, the possibility of, like, some VF thing in Tekken 8 just as a side note, and that will just continue to get people to talk about that stuff.
I mean, even the fact that he gave Virtua Fighter character costumes and stages is sort of like a little bit of a nudging of like, there might be something here, guys, and
think about how many lines of ink had to be printed and how much legal shit had to happen to get copyright Namco Bandai into a Sega game. That relationship is there, and you know how the Japanese are with existing business relationships and like their culture and how they always want to leverage what they have and what they know. It's like those are the seeds, they're planted. I think it's actually within the realm of possibility that we could get something VF related in Tekken 8 now. Like maybe a VF costume set in Tekken 8.
Too. I was watching some of Evo
Virtua Fighter
Japan,
X
and I taught Virtua Fighter, and they were using the Tekken costumes all over the place. Those looked so good. The game actually looked really fun. I mean, I might have to give it a shot.
The only time I've ever considered playing DOA is when they had Virtua Fighter characters in it. And I mean, not that DOA is a bad game, but I just don't care. I don't know what it is about the game series. Like, I'll go back and play DOA 2 or maybe 3 if I have people over. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't resonate with me. The gameplay, that is. But I guess we should kind of rapid fire a little through these questions here.
I did have one more Virtua Fighter question though. Like,
sure,
if you could, one question.
Is that the last question then?
It's the final Virtua
What's your
Fighter
answer?
question. But like, what would you like? Okay, so to give you an example, I think a lot of fighting game developers talk about like changing inputs to make fighting games more accessible. Nah, throw that out. Inputs are decently accessible. What I think really gets people into fighting games is like, the same reason we pick characters. That shit just looks cool. The day I saw Tekken 7 had slowdowns, I'm like, I'm buying Tekken 7, like immediately. It was the same day. Hey, I bought it for full price. I supported the devs, but no. I guess what I'm trying to say is that like, there's a big difference between watching a fighting game and not understanding it and looking boring to watching a fighting game, not understanding it. It's like, okay, it looks cool as hell. I must immediately play it. What do you think could be that for Virtua Fighter? What that it doesn't have now do you think could get people in the door?
Virtua Fighter, again, it's an old thing that is good when you really look at it. I would say presentation is one of the weakest aspects of the Virtua Fighter series. Now, that was not always true. It was literally the first 3D fighting game. Every new Virtua Fighter was amazing. A technical breakthrough. VF2 was the first game to use mocap, and it was like military technology at the time. VF3 blew everyone away with how awesome it looked and animated. Virtua Fighter 4 was like I believe it was like one of the first it was the first arcade game to use like cards for save data. Like every Virtua Fighter is a graphical and a technical marvel. Until 5, and then 5 was just like it's kind of like 4, but it looks a little better and it plays a little different, and that's basically where the series stopped. There was 5, 5R, and then Final Showdown. But Virtua Fighter, in the current Virtua Fighter Ultimate Showdown, it looks nice, it sounds nice, but it doesn't have flashy, cool things like that a lot of the time. There are like some hit sparks, but they're relatively understated compared to games like Tekken. There's some good music. But the music is highly customizable. It is what it is. There's some cool costumes and stuff, but that is probably the number one thing that they would change in a hypothetical Virtua Fighter. They could add some cool camera angles. They don't necessarily have to add meters or supers or anything. They just need to make the presentation a little bit more dynamic. Because what is fun and interesting about VF is not only its mechanics, which is a big part of it, but it's also the fact that it represents sort of the realistic, it represents like a martial arts movie. What if it was this style versus that style? And, you know, how many different ways could that fight really go? Tekken is much more gamey. Not to say that Virtua Fighter isn't gamey, it still has juggle combos and stuff, but you don't launch people quite as high unless you're Kage, because he's a ninja, so they let him have that. There's a ring out, which, you know, conceivably makes a little bit more sense. There's the way throws are, they're really good and they're effective and they're not easy to break and they hurt really, really bad. Taking a giant swing should be half your life. Taking a certain throw from Akira should be, you know, this much damage and so on. The presentation needs to be updated, I will say. It's probably the current weak point to Virtua Fighter.
Are you okay if I ask you 2 more questions?
Yeah, I got time.
They'll be quick ones.
Sure.
If I were a new player, which of these fighting games should I get into for my first fighter? Street Fighter 6, KOF 13 with the rollback. It's not necessarily new, but it's upcoming. And then Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown or Tekken 8.
Yeah, I mean, my real answer is you should try them all. But if you held a gun to my head and said you have to pick one, Juice, I regrettably will have to say Street Fighter 6. I say regrettably because I know deep down in my heart that Virtua Fighter will teach you more, and KOF 13 will be the most beautiful game you've ever seen. But like, Street Fighter 6 is in a prime position to be the fighting game for the new generation. So I'm an 09er, then there were like 012ers, and then there's like some 022ers and all that other fun stuff. The way that we would talk about new generations of people coming in. Street Fighter 6 is probably going, assuming it performs as well as it looks and the way it's being presented, it's probably going to get rave reviews at all the major outlets. It's probably going to go on discount within a couple of months of coming out. Capcom was going to make it easy to play the game. You might remember that they experimented with Street Fighter 5 with like free-to-play weekends. I feel like they're going to be very aggressive with that with Street Fighter 6. Get it right on PS Plus, make another free-to-play weekend on this, that, and the other. Get it on Game Pass. Get it in everyone's hands, because Street Fighter 6 is positioned to be a fun single-player experience for people that have all those gripes that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But for people like us who care about this crap, it also has awesome rollback netcode. I was in both betas. It's amazing. It shows you the ping and the rollback frames and the jitter in real time. It has working cross-play on day one, has a bunch of interesting and cool characters. Like, all the returning characters are redesigned and have lots of interesting changes to their move list. The drive system is genius. It's amazing. Street Fighter 6 has everything that a new fighting game player would want, very critically, it's going to function as a product, and also it looks amazing, and it will have plenty of other beginners to play with. Like it gives you a chance to be creative with making your avatar and stuff. It just has all that extra stuff that makes a $60 game worth buying.
So creative.
Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown doesn't, but you should play it because it's better. And you should play KOF 13 because that's better in its own way. Like every game is better in its own way. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
What about Tekken?
Every game is special.
And to be clear, I'm a huge fan of Street Fighter 6, but I'm a huge fan of lots of different fighting games at this point. Tekken is there are people who exist who think that Street Fighter 6 doesn't look good, and they will probably enjoy the way that Tekken 8 looks. I don't think I've heard anyone who says I hate the way both these games look. Okay, fine. But Tekken is still a unique and fun and deep fighting game, and I'm actually very curious about where the story is going to go. June is finally back. Heihachi's finally dead. And that's going to be kind of interesting. Tekken 8, honestly, I feel like is sort of looking to be a little weak in terms of as a product and features when you compare it directly with 6. So I'm curious if, we're going to get more modes. They're going to bring back Tekken Force, or something. Something along those lines.
Give me some Tekken Force. I'm in.
But yeah, the actual real answer to that question is Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
Asterisk, but play them all. But play them all because you want to try them, and it might turn out you really, 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 really love playing as Ash and doing these 2-minute long combos in KOF 13, the most beautiful sprite-based fighting game ever made.
Is two things. Is 13 gonna replace 15 for you when it comes out, you think? Maybe for a moment.
Probably for a moment. 13 is important to me because it was the game that got me into the series in general. After 13, I played a bunch of old games, and I've been playing the new ones. And we can say that the game is imbalanced. We can say that there's clearly a top tier or whatever, but that's not important. What's important to me is that the game is beautiful. I love the music. I love the characters and the cast. I will run through the trial mode again and explain how all the combos work again. I just have a blast with it. Because of KOF 13, I met Matador, who lives in Vegas, and that's like... I really, really love all the times that I've gone out there to play with him, and we've exchanged information on the game. And KOF 13 put me in a position where I could even pretend to play KOF 14 and 15 competitively. I don't think I'm really a top KOF player nowadays. I feel like I don't practice enough, or I'm not putting enough pressure on myself to practice and improve. So, I got top 8 at CEO, but I also know that on another day, if I didn't feel as well, or if I had a different bracket, I would not have gotten top 8 at CEO. So when it comes to competitively, KOF 15, I'm pretty good at the game. I'm not sure if I'm pushing it. I'm not sure how hard I'm going to practice it. But I know that it's appealing to me to revisit KOF 13, to teach that game to people who will be interested, to see how good the rollback is. If there will be maybe a tournament or two for it, maybe I'll enter it. But I have a very deep appreciation for 13, so I'm definitely going to play it a lot when it gets re-released. I'm gonna try and alternate my time. I still want to play and teach 15 a bit as well, but 13 is a very important and nostalgic game for me, so I'm gonna put aside time for it.
I suppose the other thing that has been a huge theme throughout this entire episode that has become abundantly clear is how unique and interesting Yu Suzuki is as a person. I know this sounds strange, but when you explain Virtua Fighter and take it beyond that and everything he's created, he has a very interesting way of looking at the world and even making video games. I really wanted to say that, especially with how he takes fighting games and he makes it something completely different. I think is just video games. It's completely fascinating. So
yeah,
if you guys don't know who Yu Suzuki is, you should definitely look into him. And yeah, really fascinating guy. I suppose next would be, for the record, in your opinion, to settle this, which fighting game do you think is the hardest to learn? And I already know the answer, but is it KOF 15? Is it Tekken 7 or Virtua Fighter 5?
Actually, I'm gonna not answer that question. I'm kidding.
All right,
I'm kidding.
that's fine.
Here's what I mean. Here's what I mean, though. This is very similar to the discussion about what keeps people out of fighting games. What is hard to a person will vary. Some people find it hard to practice in general. Other people find it hard very specifically to do an electric. And other people find it hard to very specifically do Kazuya's 13-frame electric rather than the 14. Any one of those barriers might be the reason why they find Tekken particularly hard to learn, but they find Virtua Fighter simple. But the irony is, Virtua Fighter will sometimes have you moving the joystick just as fast as doing an electric, and sometimes you'll be layering. Like, just to give an example, this is a basic defensive option select. Down, forward, brief, neutral, up, neutral, forward, guard. corner, up, forward, guard. Right? And this is done in like half a second. Is that harder than an electric? For some people, yes. For some people on hitbox, definitely no. For other people on hitbox, definitely yes. I don't use my ring finger that much, or my index finger. You know what I'm saying? Like, is Tekken hard to learn? Well, you have to block a lot. Well, that will make it hard for some and simpler for others. And I hate having to say, like, it gives such an answer that seems like it's a little bit indecisive, but, you know, on the face of it, it's like, well, KOF is fast and it's hard to anti-air. On the face of it, well, Tekken has 1,000 strings and you have to learn what's punishable and where the highs and the lows are, and that makes it tough. Virtua Fighter has an awkward timing and rhythm that you have to get used to, and there's a block button. How do block buttons work? You only have punch and kick. How do you make a fighting game out of just punch and kick? Try it, you'll see. Yeah. But it's like, what makes a fighting game hard is whatever you are weakest at as a person. And it is that part of the game that will bring you enjoyment and fulfillment if you can work on it. This is where I'm, going a little bit into rhetoric, but it's like, what is most engaging about a fighting game for me, and what I would argue is most engaging about a fighting game, even for others that don't know it yet, is when you recognize that you have grown. When you recognize that there was something you couldn't do that now you can do. It's the parts of the game that are hard that make them interesting and worth engaging with. And if you you think about what's hard and see those as barriers, then you aren't appreciating the game as much as you could. Like, everything that's hard about a game is a challenge you can overcome. And granted, it's a video game, like we said, some people don't want to practice all day, people just want to de-stress or whatever. But if you want to get the most out of the fighting game experience, you should keep trying to do things that you currently can't do. And you'll reach a point where you can do more than everyone around you. And then you start winning. And then it takes shape as something completely different. And then, you can take it to a different type of competitive journey if you would like. It's sort of like, do you want to be a teacher or do you want to be a destroyer? Serlin wrote about this in Playing to Win, despite anything else you may have heard about him and things that have been done, that book is still extremely relevant, and I recommend you read it.
What book? What's the title of the book? Just to reveal
Playing to Win.
Playing to Win.
David Serlin.
Playing to Win by David Serlin.
I'll check it out.
It's a very quick read, but like, it's when you reach a point in fighting games where you can actually do things, you decide what to do with that. Do you want to teach people? Do you want to dominate people? Do you want to instill fear in people? Or do you want to, just have fun playing wonky characters now that you have the ability to play them? Just getting back to the original question, what's the hardest game? It's like, you should pick the hard game, in my opinion. If you can stand it. If you like the way Tekken 8 looks, but you think that it's hard, then you should definitely play Tekken 8, because you will grow, and then your opinion on Tekken 8 will change, and you'll start having lots and lots more fun. And if maybe you play Tekken already, and it's like, I'm curious about Virtua Fighter, but it seems hard, then you should play it. And then you will grow, and then you'll take a new perspective on it. Just keep getting fresh perspectives and keep growing, and that is how you get the most out of fighting games.
Excellent answer.
I mean, what if you end up as the man who's great at fighting, good at at fighting games, but too good to play as friends. You got to find new friends. Is that
I mean, help your friends get better, and if they don't want to get better, that's a separate issue. But it's at the end of the day, it's a social thing. People have different limits. If you get into baseball, not all your friends are going to want to run around the baseball field all day. Not everyone is going to want to do it. So there's always going to be an element of, people will join and leave at different times of their lives when they're ready for it, when they're not ready for it. They'll have different experiences. It's a life experience thing, right? So it can be frustrating to be in a physical place or at a certain skill level where it feels like you're not getting the experience that you want. And my advice for those people is that that's how it is now. That's not necessarily how it's going to be tomorrow or in a month or in 3 months. And you are in a place and you have the ability to change where you're going. There's a future that you can make if you work on specific things, and there are people that are willing to help you work on those specific things. I can't help you with the boring stuff, the population density, the socioeconomics, the where you live, but I can help you with some of the other stuff. And if that's the hurdle, get someone like that to help you, because it will absolutely help you get to where you want to be with fighting games. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome, man. Juice, where can people find you?
Okay, I'm pretty easy to find. So I'm on Twitter way too much, which is annoying because it's like my only social media, and Elon Musk is really, really, really trying to burn the whole place down. So at some point I may need to make a shift to Mastodon, or I may just eventually only be on Twitch. But I hang around the KOF and Virtua Fighter Discords a lot. So if you ever ask for a tip, I'm likely to chime in and help you with some of that stuff. But my Twitter is at JuiceboxFGC. I'm pretty open to receiving questions about stuff. And I'm on Twitch also as JuiceboxFGC. And I stream pretty frequently. I'm trying to stream between 3 to 5 times a week after work and on off days. But I enjoy talking about this sort of stuff. I appreciate and welcome questions like this. I want to help people understand and appreciate and enjoy fighting games for what I know them to be, which are an amazing genre that are well worth the effort. But yeah, it shouldn't be too hard to find me. Twitter and Twitch are probably going to be the best ways, at least for now. Yeah.
Awesome.
Do you still do lessons every now and then? I know people have taken lessons from the past. I think Matt's taking lessons. I've watched.
I think I dabbled with that in the Street Fighter V days. I personally do not like giving paid lessons. I just have an anxiety about someone with a lot of money who's willing to pay for something that technically is valuable, but if they don't necessarily have the experience that they want, I don't want to become a customer service person. I don't want to have to talk about things like refunds or dissatisfaction or whatever. You should see me as just a dude and a resource that you can ask for help. If you would like something private, like a lesson of some kind, let me know. We can play. If you need to set up a time where I'm not streaming, let me know. I'll see if I can work with you. I don't think money needs to enter the equation whatsoever. If you appreciate what I have to say, donate to the stream or something. I want it to be a free exchange. I believe very, very specifically in the freedom of information and in the scientific enterprise and on sharing that stuff, down to my core. It is one of my central core philosophies. I hate when money enters spaces that it doesn't need to be in. And I feel like fighting game information is one of those things. I understand why people value it. I understand why it can be viewed as something that's worth paying people for, but I also don't see it as necessary for that. I'm just a dude. You're just a dude or a dudette. You are just a person who's interested in fighting game knowledge. You can just ask and that'll be fine.
Well, he's a dude, she's a dude, and we're all dudes.
We're all dudes.
We're all dudes.
Hey.
West Coast, everyone's a dude.
Quint, where can people find you? Also, really quick, sorry, I'm gonna link those Discords in the video description and the podcast description. So if you guys are looking for it, it should be down there. Quint, where can people find you?
Mostly scrubbing it up on twitch.tv/QuintessenceHD, playing Tekken 7 and trying to play some variety, but that's not really working out so well lately. Also posting fairly sparsely and sparingly on Twitter because it's just a dumpster fire right now. And of course on this podcast, where I just add little quips and quotes and do my best.
So you guys can find the backlog on Twitch, Instagram, YouTube. We're on TikTok. Anywhere you can find podcasts, search the backlog or the backlog podcast. You should be able to find us. But other than that, guys, this has been the Backlog Podcast number 51. We'll see you soon. Peace out, y'all. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.